And now it's my privilege to not introduce, but to announce our speaker, our own Reverend Philip Falcone.
God bless and thank you. As we continue to explore our Declaration of Principles, I want to ask you one question before we venture into that. And that would be what might the cornerstones of religion be? There's a common thread that connects all religions that have come before us and that will assuredly come after us. There are some common threads there.
I guess the first and foremost is the belief in some sort of supreme being, some sort of something that has ultimate power over everything. And the religion is about the relationship with that power or that supreme being, what their expectations are.
That's one stone. Any others?
Life after life, the promise of maybe being with that creative force, or that there is another type of existence beyond, at the end of this one, that the death of the physical body is not the end, it's the beginning of something better, I think, in general.
Yes, continuity of life is another of those foundation stones. So is love. But our focus is we affirm that the existence and personal identity of the individual continue after the change called death. Every religion that has ever come into existence has been forgotten, that exists today, that will come into being tomorrow, all have this cornerstone connecting them. It's like a wheel, and those cornerstones form the hub. There are only three that we mentioned, but we're only concerned with the one. And the belief in the continuity of life, you could say, was pioneered, but it wasn't. The ancient Egyptians are just the first ones we happen to have read about it, because they have found that the Neanderthals may have held a similar belief, but there's no writing to confirm that. There's only the artifacts that they find in the graves and the way they're positioned. And this was a recent discovery. I read this particular article. I haven't noted it in my writing here, but I read this particular article just within a couple of weeks where this was discovered. And their body was oriented in the fetal position in the east and west. And this belief in the continuity of life, the existence of the personal identity continuing, can be traced back to the early Egyptians. Because, well, there are the archaeological findings, the early pharaohs, when they made their transition, they took the whole staff with them. And the belief with this was so that the staff could continue to serve them. And they were were the occupants of what came to be called Abydos, or the royal necropolis, the beautiful West. There are several different names in that. But, it was them who divided spirit and soul, spirit being the animating force, soul being the personality. But where did they come up with this belief? Does anyone have any thoughts on that? Where might they have come up with this belief? How might this belief, this foundation stone, have been formed? Don't get caught up in deep thought. It's as easy as going to the window and looking out, unless, of course, it's cloudy. What does the sun do every night, every evening? Not at night, but every evening. The sun dies in the west, and then it's born again in the east. This is the most fundamental, the most simple example of how this developed. It's how it developed. When we look at nature, which is what Andrew Jackson Davis does, he directs us to nature. What do the plants do in the fall? They wither. By December, they've disappeared. And then by some miracle, they're back. They continue. It's the same with the animals. They disappear and then, whoa, I haven't seen you in several months. They just reappear. This is how it developed. So the belief became natural for them. And, Andrew Jackson Davis is someone I like to fall back on with a lot of spiritualism's philosophies. He is noted as being the one to develop the philosophy in spiritualism. And the way he puts it is, we're going on a trip. When you're going on a trip, what do you do?
Pack.
Pack. What else? What about your destination?
Make a map.
Make a map. And where do you draw that information from? Google,
Yeah.
Bing,
Information.
the library. And what is it that we do with this information? We trust that it's correct. Because I don't know. I've heard stories about GPS taking people to the middle of cornfields. And that story came from the very first person who rented a room from me. Plugged in an address and it took him to the middle of a cornfield. He couldn't believe it. First time I went to Reverend Vardaman's. Maybe I shouldn't say the first time. When I went back out there after several years, I forgot the way. So naturally, I plug in her address. I get the map and everything. It takes me to the opposite end of town. I'm driving. I said, this doesn't look right. But I figured it out. But, it's like, I use the term life's other rooms because that's what we're doing. It's like we're moving through this great house that happens to be us. And, we've got these different layovers, and we experience these layovers because we go into these different rooms, life's other rooms. And, it's a term that I like to use. But Davis described the change like this, and I love this quote. The passage from this sphere into the next is no more a change to the individual than a journey from America to England. Accepting the almost complete emancipation of, consequent upon the change, such as from rudimental misdirection and earthly imperfections. Of course, my question, and I'm sure others have asked this question as well, maybe some of you have. Why hasn't anyone returned from their trips?
Who'd want to?
Mhm.
Well,
Didn't need to.
who would need to? Obviously, someone would want to, because Ian Stevenson, who was a scientist, discovered in his studies, in for one of his books is Where Reincarnation and Biology Intersect. While he was conducting experiments and developing protocols, he investigated 112 cases of supposed reincarnation. Do you know what he found? Anybody want to venture a guess?
100%?
Not quite. But of those 112 cases, 90 of those cases supported the theory of reincarnation. So we do step out of those rooms. We just don't bring the baggage with us. We don't pack our bags. We do as Beth's message was. We fling the door open and we just jump on through. and in hope that someone will send the baggage after us. Well, it sounds good anyway. But what he found was that children up to the age of 5 or 6 are able to have memories of a previous life. So what are your thoughts about this? Any thoughts, Beth?
Well, that just it just reminds me, when I was little, and it was before entering school, I was a moody little thing. I would rock in a chair and I would just say over and over to myself, it was a mantra. I don't want to be here. I don't like it here. I'm not meant to be here. I don't like it here. It's just now in my adult life that I understand that.
Mhm. Mhm.
How about you, Sandy? Any thoughts?
Well, it brought up a memory that I had too. But I don't actually have the memory, but my grandmother would tell me that I used to do this. I used to wake up at night and tell my mother that my skin was yellow and that my father was a doctor, and I went in the water and the shark got me. And I would laugh about it. I wasn't upset. I was just relating something. And I did it more than once, they said. But I would just say, the shark is going to get me. The shark got me. And I think they told me that I said my daddy couldn't fix it, or he couldn't help me, or something like that, if I remember now correctly. It's been a long time. But my grandmother would tell me that story. So and even when she told me, it kind of didn't really bother me. I probably was a teenager when she told me about it, but it just seemed like a real natural thing to hear, and I was very comfortable with it, very comfortable, and it was affirming. You know, it was affirming to me. So yeah, very revealing story.
Cool. But you, Reverend Thomas, any thoughts?
Well, it's an interesting discussion about that transition, and I guess on a similar vein with with Sandy, uh, I didn't have that kind of memory experiences, but one of the things that uh, that I recalled and wondered about is that when I was very young and we would play, makeup games, and I'm talking single digit years, that if we were making up characters, that I would always want to make up a Spanish name, and not knowing any Spanish people, and don't know that I was exposed to anything on the limited television that was available. It just seemed strange. And then the summer that I think I was probably 13 or 14, I found my mother would sign up for these record clubs. So we ended up with an eclectic collection. And one of the things that I found in the stack of LPs was a Spanish course. And I was drawn and spent the time taking that Spanish course all on my own, without knowing any Spanish speaking people or having any way to, exercise that or to experience that. But it was something that I was just drawn to. So there's just a couple of examples that happened that give me some clue that perhaps maybe in the last life, or certainly in previous lives, I was, spoke a different language. So
Wonderful. Any thoughts, Sharon?
Well, a couple things did come to mind too. I had forgotten about that, Sandy. Completely forgot about that.
I probably was no more than 3. I don't think it would. Probably 2 to 3, something like.
And we used to sleep. We slept in a double bed until we were, I don't know, 7 or 8 or something. Maybe we slept in a double bed. So I was probably around, there was probably sleeping at the time you were relating your story. But I remember, I sort of remember hearing that my mother, I think, used to say, because the two of us were inseparable. And I remember sort of hearing something like them saying something like we had our own language. Like we would entertain each other. We didn't need anybody else. We had 2 older siblings, but we probably could care less about. And really, and they could care less about us as well, because we got all the attention because we were 2 and they didn't like that.
A novelty. Yeah.
Yeah. So, but that we just pretty much we were on our own. We communicated. And I think we probably did a lot of this communicating more than even physically speaking. And also that I was told as an adult that we had a Greek incarnation, both of us together, that this was not the first time that we had come back together. This had happened before. So that's my only, and I don't really remember that so much, anything about that, but yeah, that was kind of those are my only 2 real memories. I don't remember having any special thing come to me or speaking anyway, or other than what I was told. It has been a long time too. So, yeah. But having said that, my grandson, he brings it all to me. The things that he does just totally amaze me. And the pictures he draws, and I have my picture downstairs that he gave me in August that he told me it was Mount Everest. I don't know if I told you this before, but there are his three brothers. He has no brothers in this lifetime. His three brothers are climbing the mountain with him. And they all have their own paths, and they're these zigzaggy paths. And there are three, up at the top, there are three little lines, and each one is on a line, and they are up at the top. And his three brothers are, and I feel like how it is with him, and I don't know if I'm right or not, but I feel like with him that his memory is inclusive of several lifetimes. I don't think it's just one, because he talks about different ethnic groups of people, and the names that he has for these people are not typical. Like one of them is Frank, pretty good English name. The other two are animal names that I associate with an Indian, Native American people. One of them is crocodile, and the other is alligator. But I look at these names as Native American to some tribes that called each other by those names. So when I don't just laugh them off and say, oh, that's just silly, because yeah, it is kind of silly, but I believe that he believes these are his brothers. And there's a sister too, but she wasn't on the mountain that day, I guess. But when I got to, when we went there last August and I got in the car just from the airport, he gave me this picture in the car as soon as I got there. And he told me who it all was. And I brought that picture home, and I have it because I just love it. So I appreciate what he tells me. I don't just ignore it as childhood, ramblings. And it'll be interesting to see what this little girl has to bring to this picture as well. And Beth and I have talked about this. So Beth has given me a lot of insight into her personality. So I'm really looking forward to it.
I forgot about that.
Yes. And she gave me a poetry book because she told me she's going to love poetry. So she gave me this book that was hers when she was little. So I have this book. So I'm really excited about listening to what she has to say.
Karen, did you tell them the story about what Everett said when he found out he was having a new baby brother or sister?
Well, he told us that it was a girl, and this was in August. This was before we knew, because my daughter was only 3 months along. He told us that she was a girl, and he wanted a sister. But then he told us her name. Now, there's some back and forth about this name. They are not going to name her what he said, but he said that her name was Isa Charles. So now we have a man's name, and the last name is Rain. Now, my daughter, we looked it up. I looked up Isa. It is a very spiritual name. It's Middle Eastern, very spiritual. But then my daughter said, well, he heard that on a cartoon. So that kind of, to me, I was like, oh my gosh, where did he get that name from? Where would you even hear that? I mean, he doesn't watch a ton of television. But my daughter said that's where he heard it. So I just don't believe they're gonna, and I think he still calls her that. And that may well be her name, but I don't think it's gonna be her name. So anyway, they had snow a couple weeks ago in Seattle. They had a bunch of snow. And he went outside and he built an ice baby and an ice brother. And they were little snowmen. And the one with the little girl one, they took a piece of off of a tree that had like some fur like needles, and they put that in the top that was supposed to be hair for her. Yeah, so it was so cute. It was so cute. And he stood in between them. He was so proud of himself. He built his ice brother and ice baby. So anyway, he's a character. He really just, he amazes me. So anyway, so those, having said that, and that's my contribution. But you know, I think we could learn a lot, you know, from listening to these little ones and not being too judgmental that they just have vivid imaginations, or they, you know, all of those things.
Excellent. Well, it's nice that you mentioned Native Americans, because before the wrappings of Margaret and Kate, before that, about 4, maybe 5 years prior to that, and I believe it was in Rochester, but I could have the city wrong. The Quakers, a lot of the Quaker churches there, the members were visited by Native American spirits. Some of them asked permission to take possession of the temple or the body. Some of them didn't. In those parishes where they didn't, well, even in the other ones, but particularly the ones where they didn't ask permission, people were horrified. You know, you've got the work of the devil and everything else going on with that. But in those congregations where they asked permission to come in, now I don't know how they managed to do that, but anyway, they split off from the Quakers and rented their own hall and place to meet. And the visitations continued for, I don't know, I want to say 2, maybe 3 years, and then they left. And they said that they would be back in 5 years. And between 4 and 5 years is when the wrappings occurred in Hydesville. And some of those investigators, some of those people attending the Corinthian Hall in 1849, when they investigated the sisters, were Quakers from that experience. So, any thoughts or comments from anyone?
Very interesting.
Well, we affirm the existence and personal identity of the individual, and that it continues after the change called death. We know this to be true. The theory was developed by an ancient civilization and proven later by acceptable terms. But the argument still stands. Why doesn't anyone remember?
Would you think that it's because it inhibits or impedes one's progress?
That would make sense.
Past, you know, would too much thinking about the past would not be good to move forward?
Think about life, your life, as it is right now. Do you remember everything about it? No, I see a lot of heads. No, I don't. In fact, there are huge portions I prefer not to remember.
Amen to that.
I've always felt it was a necessary amnesia for us to concentrate on this life,
Mhm.
because we could be really caught up like a great novel in just reviewing all the other lives. In that there are selective passages from those lives that are pertinent to what we're doing here and our goals here, our purpose here, maybe to get something right. And it may be helpful to have a recollection of that previous life event to put context as to why you're facing this. And but otherwise, it's past life regression is just entertainment, unless there's specific purpose that it confronts you today for this life. So
Exactly. There's a theory, if I recall, within the realm of psychology that they call it necessary forgetfulness. And the idea with that is to forget those experiences that are mundane in order to make room for those experiences that are novel. And here's the other thing to keep in mind as well, and this has been demonstrated through science and neuroscience and psychology as well. And that is, well, first I'm going to ask you, can any of you remember a boring event?
Really?
No. No one can remember a boring event, because in order for you to remember something, now this is something you may want to jot down or keep in mind. In order to remember something, it has to have provoked some form of emotion. So that's one of the reasons why I suggest people write down their experiences, write down what they want to remember. It's why I write notes down, because in doing that very activity, I'm engaged emotionally, mentally. I'm more likely to remember most of it. So, it's something to keep in mind. And I will say, God bless and thank you for allowing me to share.
thank you.